Welcome to the September meeting of the Early Television Foundation Society. Want to start out by thanking the New Jersey Antique Radio Club for sponsoring the meeting and providing the Zoom feed for us. Let me turn it over to Dave for his normal courtesy announcement, and then we'll get started.
Okay, we've been a pretty courteous bunch. I don't think anybody's misbehaved badly. Just the usual reminder to please keep your microphones muted at all times unless you're in the middle of asking a question, and that helps keep the chaos to a minimum.
Okay, let me tell you, the museum report is pretty brief this month. We received a donation of 30 some odd used but good CRTs, including things like 12 LP4s and 10 BP4s that are always in demand. So we've added them to our inventory list. So pass the word if anybody is looking for a good CRT. We've also been contacted by a guy in Germany whose father died, and he has an extensive television and radio collection, and in the television part includes nothing pre-war, but the earliest post-war German and Russian sets, which would be a great addition to our collection. I'm not sure where we'd put them. We'd have to thin out some other parts of the collection to make room for them. Don't know if that's going to happen. Then, of course, because I haven't heard back any details from him, but nice if that happened. It'd be fairly expensive to get it to Ohio, but I think a good investment. I'll keep you filled in on it at next month's meeting. Swap meet is coming up October 15th, 10 to 2 in the museum parking lot. I think we're going to have pretty good attendance. A lot of people have indicated they're going to come. And there should be, we've heard rumors of some pretty nice stuff being available. So put that on your calendar if you're interested in that. Let me stop there and ask if there's anyone who is new to this meeting that would like to introduce themselves. Well, I guess not. Maybe either we're all old timers, or there's some new people that are shy. In any case, let's move on to the next part of the meeting, which is a set that we're featuring that's in the museum's collection. The set this month is a TradioVision Model 13. As many of you probably know, there was a flurry of sets designed for use in bars and clubs that were introduced in the late 40s. The first ones in late 46, starting in 47. This is before many sets were in homes, and a lot of people watched TV, especially sporting events in bars and clubs. This one has the largest screen of any set that I've seen, 3 by 4 feet. We found it in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was in Jim Fink's bar. We got it from the son of Jim Fink. The bar is still in existence, or it was at the time that we got the set. It is, whoops, there we go. It has, the screen is plastic, and they're actually two screens, an inner and outer screen, both of which are plastic. Ours is pretty well deteriorated, which you'd expect. The set had a separate RF unit that right there that had and the grill cloth has come loose and in, but it had the tuner and the IF amps and video circuitry. The main cabinet had, I'm not sure what that. I guess that's a remote. That's a remote control that came with it. I don't know what it does. I haven't paid any attention to that in a long time. The main cabinet has several chassis in it. One of them is a power supply chassis, and it has two 5U4s, so it's pretty hefty. And it has the high voltage and sweep chassis. And of course, the projection assembly. Now, the projection assembly uses a 5TP4, and it was made by RCA. This set came out in 1949, so it's sort of late in the game. In fact, I don't know of any sets that were made after 49 of this type. Most of the sets designed for bars and clubs were made in 47 and 48. I don't know how large a manufacturer TradioVision or Tradio Inc., as they're called, also. I don't know what percentage of the market they had. They made a number of different models. They made one with a smaller screen, a model 14, and they made another model 18 or 19, I can't remember which, that had a separate, had the electronics in a rack and a separate projection unit with a screen. But they all use that same 5TP4 with the parabolic mirror as the video source. The set uses 5 1B3s in it in a voltage multiplier circuit that generates 27 kilovolts. And the whole thing is involved, the whole high voltage assembly is in this plexiglass case, I guess to prevent arcing. Needless to say, it produced a really dim picture, especially because the screen was so large. Probably the dimmest picture of any of them. The other projection sets we have are 2 by 3 foot, and so forth. Tradio also made some standard TV sets with standard CRTs, 3 or 4 different models. I think the last set they made was in the middle or late 50s. I guess that's about all I've got to say about it. Oh, and I guess the horizontal deflection uses 2 6BG6s in parallel. So it was a beast. And that's about all I've got to say about it. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
that
Steve.
remote control looks a lot like a Zenith remote control that was a wired one back many years ago.
Huh. It does, doesn't it?
That looks like a Zenith logo on the top of it. In fact, as I recall, those things had a motor they were attached to.
Yeah, that is.
Changed the channel and ran the volume control up and down.
Yeah, that is a Zenith logo. See the Z?
Yeah. I wonder, Larry, is that plugged into the back of the cabinet? No? Yes. Okay. Well, then apparently, but that seems like a little later than not plugged in. Okay. So apparently, I suspect that's just somebody has moved it. It belongs with the Zenith set. Because I don't recall that coming. There you go. I don't recall that coming with the set when I picked it up.
Steve?
Yeah.
Are any of the circuits apparently clones of any other sets from that era from other manufacturers?
A lot of the circuitry is very similar in all those sets from that era. This set uses a bunch of miniature tubes, and some of the very early ones, the 46 and 47 models, a lot of them are all octals, or mostly octals. But it doesn't strike me as being a copy of anything, especially that voltage, not a doubler. It must be a voltage quadrupler or something with the 5 1B3s. I've never seen that before.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, this is Paul Cooper Smith. I just had a question. Is that a working unit? Could that be powered up? Has it been restored? Do you know?
That one has not. We have one set that has. I haven't powered it up in a long time. That Larry, flip the camera around. I can't remember the name of it, but it's on the end. Come on around some more. That one, the Telecon, has been restored, which is another of the same type of set. And as you can see, the screen is substantially smaller. We restored that years ago, but none of the others are working. Would not be difficult to get them working. They're pretty simple sets. Any other questions?
I was just wondering what the list price of that was back in the day, 1949. Does it say there?
I don't know. Let me see. I've got the. No, I don't have it here, and I don't think I've seen that anywhere. And I just noticed that the set I purchased from Nick Fink's grandfather, and at that time, he purchased the set in 1950, at the beginning of 1950. And the only TV station in Grand Rapids at the time came on the air, and Channel 8 came on the air in 1949. But I don't see a price here.
Did I see something on the one of those pictures that it was made in Asbury Park, New Jersey?
Yes.
Because I used to live not far from there when I was up in the Army in New Jersey, and I don't ever recall seeing anything like that around that area.
Yeah, there's an ad for Tradio. It says, doesn't give an address, but just says Department 0-91, Asbury Park, New Jersey, whatever that means.
Wonder how far that was from the Stone Pony up there where Bruce Springsteen got his start.
Couldn't tell you.
It's something 6th Avenue or something there. I don't know if that was New York or New Jersey. 6th Avenue wasn't far away from there.
And Jack Dempsey's restaurant that's mentioned in one of the letters that Larry showed was quite a place. I went there a couple of times with my parents in my much younger days. I think it closed around the early 1970s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Larry, flash up to that. I think it's on the wall, the pictures of Jack Dempsey's restaurant. Yeah, there's that set with a much brighter picture than I think it really had.
Yeah.
That picture looks painted in.
Yeah, right.
I had a question, please.
Yes.
That one that you showed there a couple of minutes ago that worked, or that you got restored, that Telecon or whatever that was.
Right.
Yeah, what was the size of that screen?
That's about 2 by 3 feet.
Well, that would be, it looks to me like there could have been like CRT picture tubes that size.
Well, the only tube close to that in the late 40s was the 20 BP4, which Dumont made made TV sets 4 bars using a 20 BP4, substantially smaller than that, but that was the largest tube at that.
Yeah. Okay. I just wondered.
Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess we can move on to the main event. I guess, Dave, you want to turn this over to John?
Yep, time for our featured presentation.
All right.
So I will pin your picture up, John, so that if somebody does talk over you, at least the video won't cut away.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Garrison, live in northern Jersey. Actually, Dave Sika used to live about 3 miles away from me. I've been attending early television museum conventions probably since about 2001. I've been collecting antique radios and TVs since I was a teenager, so that puts it at 50 plus years. And I want to thank Steve and Dave for inviting me to share my collection tonight. I look forward to doing that. So my wife has graciously accepted the responsibility as main camera person here. So I'm going to swing it over to her. We're going to start in what I call the Radio TV Museum and kind of go around. And I would invite people. You'll see a lot of radios. I really won't talk about those. I'll focus on the TVs. But if anybody has a question about anything, feel free to sing out. Happy to comment. A couple of areas of recognition before I start. Many of you know Tim Moritz. I'm fortunate enough to live about 35 minutes from Tim. And if it weren't for Tim, all the sets that you see tonight operating, about 10, wouldn't have been possible. I'm a great recapper, but I'm not a real good diagnostician, but Tim is. So I get them half working, take them to Tim, and he tunes them up. Another person that has done some work for me, I'll demo a K-part. Chuck Azalina did some work on that. A Predicta, Scott Marshall did some work, I guess 15 plus years ago, and Tim just tuned it up. Some of you may recognize me from the 2005 convention. That was a lot of fun. I brought a Model 5, and all eyes were on the back of my minivan at the time in 2005, and I sold the Model 5 to Wayne Aber. And I think he still has it down in Florida. It was 100% original. Nothing had really been changed. I just didn't have the wherewithal to do it justice, so I decided to sell it. And I think Wayne has chosen, if I recall somebody telling me he's chosen to keep it original, I'm not sure he's restored it. So enough of the small talk. I'm going to have my wife flip the camera around and we'll begin the tour. Turn around. Yeah, sorry about the moving from room to room. We'll do a little bit of that, but we'll start in the main room here. And actually, probably my prized piece. I don't have any super, pre-war specials or a Dumont 108 or anything like that, but I do have a Dumont Hampshire teleset that has been restored. And there's kind of an interesting story behind this. A fellow in my church in 1994 bought a house in town, and he called me up. He said, "Hey, John, there's this thing. I think it's a TV. I'm really not sure what it is. Can you just come over and get it out of here?" So I went over and looked in the house, and here's a Hampshire teleset. Now, as many of you are familiar, Westminsters, there were tons of Westminsters. I'd seen loads of them, but I'd never seen a Hampshire. And this one was actually in pretty decent shape. It had some water damage. I refinished the cabinet, and I recapped the whole set. And the interesting story behind this is back in 1994, is through an acquaintance, I met Les Paul's audio man, a fellow by the name of Earl Davis. And he was a TV repairman back in the 40s and 50s. And he actually built the studio in Les Paul's house in Wawa, New Jersey. That's about 10 or 15 miles from where I live. And I had the good fortune through Earl and this other acquaintance to meet Les. And Les came to the house about 3 times and viewed the collection. We had a lot of fun. As some of you may know, up until I guess about I think he died 2011, 2012, something like that. But up until about shortly before his death, he was playing every Monday night at the Iridium in New York City, and a bunch of us would go in there. We went 3 or 4 times to see him play there. So the fun part of this is I recapped the set, got the radio, phono, everything to work, but couldn't get the TV to work. And at that time, I had just met Earl, Les's audio man, and invited him to come to the house. And within 20 minutes, with just a volt-o-meter, he found an open resistor in the sweep chassis, and it came back to life. So here you can see it, Tom and Jerry special here. But the set works really nicely. It's got good audio. I'm not going to turn the audio on these sets because I'm afraid that there'll be too much background noise. But the set performs really nicely. At some point, I should probably do a little bit of alignment. The yoke is not quite right. The size, vertical size, vertical linearity could probably use a little tune-up. But Steve's comment earlier about the 20 BP4, that would have been the original tube in this set. Somebody changed it, I'm going to guess, probably in the 1950s, probably early 50s, because the 20 BP4s didn't have a long life. And there's the metal 19 AP4 that Steve mentioned is in the set now. Have no idea how many years it's been in. I mean, I've had the set for almost 30 years. And as you can see, it performs really nicely. So I'm kind of a Dumont guy and have some Dumont stuff here on the counter of a television repair shop. A good Dumont repair person would have had that classic wood Dumont design there. And then there's an advertisement back here that somebody found for me. This is the actual Hampshire teleset, talking about the input tuner and all the features of the day. And I guess one more interesting story about this set. When I obtained it, there's about 6 chassis in the thing. It weighs probably 400 plus pounds. And even after you get the 6 chassis out, the thing is still a beast. So I went over and talked to my neighbor, actually 2 neighbors, to help me get it in my minivan for my friend's house. And he said, John, my mother-in-law, who lives in my in-law apartment, I think she used to work for Dumont. Well, long story short, literally the person in the house right next door, his mother-in-law worked at Dumont as a teenager in the 40s. And she hobbled over here in 1994 when I had the set working and said, oh, yeah, I worked on the tuners, is what she worked on, I guess, putting them in the various sets. So that was kind of a fun thing. And something that she had that I really cherish, it's kind of hard to see this cover, but this is a 1941 Dumont, I'll call it brochure, and it starts with the history of Dumont going back to when he founded it in Alan Dumont's house in Montclair, New Jersey, which is only about 15 minutes from where I live. So you have a little history. There's Alan Dumont, a little history of the organization, the development of the picture tube. It's really, I've never seen another one. It's got kind of a velvet cover. I think it's about 40 pages long. There you've got his oscillographs, some of his TV cameras, some really interesting things. But rather than torture you with a whole brochure, the part I find really fun is the back page. And hopefully you can see this back page, but sales in 1931, 3%. And you go up to 1941, which was the year this brochure was printed, and sales were up almost 42,000%. So, kind of the fun fact of the day. So I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's called Pioneering the Cathode Ray and Television Arts is the title of this. And this came from this woman who actually worked in the Dumont factory in Clifton in the 1940s. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Some of you are probably aware these sets were really pricey. This is the Westminster, and you'll see a doghouse that I have in my collection in a couple of minutes. But in 1946-47, these things were $24.95, which was probably an annual salary for a lot of people back then. So they were really pricey. I was very fortunate with this set to actually get the complete owner's manual, which unfortunately is kind of in tatters here. I probably need to spend some time and repair this. But anyway, it's all here in some shape or form. Another Dumont item, the clock that was frequently seen in TV repair shops. And if we swing around to the opposite wall, a real prize that I got, this Dumont Wide Horizon, bigger, brighter, better telesets. That's probably the nicest banner I've ever seen. And I forget, I might have gotten this, I think at Antique Radio Club of New Jersey swap meet in Parsippany. This would have been, 10 plus years ago, a fellow had this, and it was in remarkable condition. I don't think this ever hung in a store window because it's not faded, one bit. I'm really fortunate about that. So I think that's it for Oh, no, we have a couple of other things over here that we can take a look at. Dumont matches. So when you went into a dealer, I'll actually step over here. You could actually get a box of matches. And I think the same fellow that sold me the clock, fellow in Colorado, all the book matches, none of them used, inside this TV, which is kind of fun. So everybody smoked back then, so it wasn't uncommon to have matches readily available. And I guess the last thing I have here is another matchbook from Dumont. Not sure which set is featured there, but it's kind of an interesting item. There we go. So a little bit of Dumont memorabilia. Okay, we will swing around now to over the Dumont, a more typical banner, and this is typical condition, somewhat faded, but Zenith quality goes in before the name goes on, kind of nice. And something that I picked up recently on eBay, something I've never seen before. Some of you may have seen this. TV sets don't wear out, they burn out. Philco cool chassis. And it's interesting, I bought this on eBay, I guess about 3 or 4 months ago. And when I unwrapped it, it had several creases. And the guy on eBay was very honest. He said, it's a nice shape, but it's got lots of creases. I thought, well, let me just take a gamble here and see if I can iron some of this out. I know some of you are probably shrieking, but I used a wet towel, and that didn't really do anything. So I turned the iron on low and actually put the iron right on the back. And the thing really smoothed out nicely. So it's actually next to the Dumont banner, probably the second nicest one that I have. So that's kind of a nice item of interest. We'll move around now. Actually, we'll take a look at this. Nothing special, but an RCA set from 1954. As soon as I open the door here, this has kind of the reason I like it's got kind of an oriental design. It's got a nice cabinet, but as soon as you open it, you'll notice how similar it is to the CT100, of course, the ARC 5, not ARC 5, but the Model 5 rather. So that same kind of motif design, instrument panel, if you will, is evident in this set. This needs to be recapped, and I did buy at the museum, I guess about 10 years ago, replacement CRT that tested good, and I've got to put that in. That's on the docket at this point. So moving over, we're going to see now Philco Predicta. And as I mentioned earlier, Scott Marshall, I got this set. Some of you may have heard the name Ralph Williams, who was the definitive radio collector and authority on Atwater, Kent. And when I was a kid in 1971, I was 16 and started this hobby. I lived in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and Ralph lived in King of Prussia and worked for GE at the time. And he was one of my mentors. My other mentor was Bill Denk, who was the lead patent attorney for Philco. And so these two gentlemen kind of took me under their wing as a teenager. And I got this Predicta from Ralph. He died, I think it was 2002. I helped his widow and several of us. He had a collection of 500 plus radios, TVs, barns filled with stuff out of Eastern Long Island, Orient Point. The Atwater, Kent portion of his collection is now in the AWA Museum up in New York State in Rochester. So this hails from Ralph, and when I first got it, I had met Scott Marshall down at, I think it was RCA Labs in Princeton at one of the meetings down there. And he said, "Oh, you've got a Predicta." I said, "Yeah, I really need someone to work on it." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to tackle it and add that to my repertoire." So Scott did a nice job. This is going back, oh my gosh, 2005, something like that. And he had it working. In recent years, it developed a sync issue. I just got it back from Tim Moritz, and he finished recapping it. Some of the RC units were bad, those Philco home brew jobs. And there are people happily, somebody in Texas manufactures these things. So he brought the set back to life, and it's really operating beautifully at this point. I have a couple of Predicta advertisements here. Hopefully they're going to be visible on the camera. But this one on the left is the exact set. And it's probably hard to read the text, but I think it's $249.95. And on the back of my Predicta, written in magic marker on the back, I'm fortunate enough to have the back on this set, is $249.95. So I thought it was interesting. The set actually sold for what it was advertised at in this. This was Holiday Magazine, which is interesting. And here's another, ad over here. So Philco Predicta. Now, the only disappointment for me with the Predicta is the audio is not that great. It's got that funky oval speaker, which really doesn't have a lot of tone depth, but the picture quality is quite good. Okay, we're going to take a quick breather for a moment, and just something I think is a lot of fun. Some of you may have seen, but may not have. It's not a TV, but it's a K-part. I call it Record Flipper from 1942. I'll just do a quick demo of this just because it's fun. I saw one of these in the AWA Museum in New York and figured I've got to have one. And through one of the journals, I think it was the AWA monthly bulletin, found a guy in Syracuse, New York that had one. So I'll just hit reject here. We'll have the first record come out. But the engineering of this thing is just unbelievable. Hopefully it won't be cranky. And a real shout out here to Chuck Azzolina, who some of you may know as Mr. K-Part. This guy is awesome and brought this thing back to life. Two 12-inch electromagnetic speakers, got a phenomenal tone. Probably hard to tell over Zoom, but sounds really good. I'm not going to torture you with the whole thing here, but I have it on Flipper. So it will actually turn each record over in the magazine, and it advertises. And with this, I was fortunate enough to get the actual advertisement. And of course, the marketing back then was really sensational. In the studios of world-famed musicians, palaces of nobility, homes of distinguished music lovers throughout the world, you'll find a K-part. The classic sentence here is, it's fully automatic, continuous in operation, does not require reloading or restacking of the records. If you put 20 records in, and you can mix 10-inch and 12-inch records, and if you set it to turn each record over, you get 2 hours of record playing without touching it, which is actually kind of fun. But it says, this phenomenal performance is matched by the gentleness with which the records are handled more carefully than by human hands, which I thought was kind of amusing. So the marketing copy back then was a real classic. And I drove to Syracuse, New York to pick this set up with a friend. And it was bought by his father in 1942 at Clark Music Company in Syracuse. And when you went to Clark Music Company, if you went to the second floor, you visited the K-part Salon, where all these things were displayed. So really kind of a really interesting piece here. So a little distraction from TVs, but nonetheless, kind of fun. Okay, from here, we're going to move into the next room, see the next battery of TVs. Or actually, we got 2 more over here. Yeah, shout out on this one, the console on the ground. This is a 1951 Zenith, nothing special, but a really super set. And I got this from Scott Marshall, who restored this. This would have been, I'm going to guess, 2003, something like that, and remains working beautifully. The only issue with this set is I've got a broken dial port on the AM/FM, but other than that, works beautifully. So really a nice, I think, example of Zenith porthole. And in 1951, when you would go and watch TV at a friend's house, I mean, you got all dolled up. You can see the gals here in their evening gowns, kind of a really nice expose of what people did in 1951 for entertainment. But yeah, TVs were still obviously up and coming. Not everybody had one. And if you had a Zenith, that was kind of a special set, higher end. So that was fun. On top of the Zenith, we have a GE locomotive circa 1948. And again, a shout out to Tim Moritz, who brought this back to life after my recapping. Actually performs quite well. Good audio, good steady picture, good resolution. So once again, kind of a fun set. This Dumont Doghouse, I actually bought this at the museum, I'm going to say, 2016, something like that. Needs to be recapped, but it was much better than the one I had. So this is on the docket. I think probably 2023, this will come back to life. I'll recap it, take it to Tim, and it will perform beautifully like these other sets. So a nice Dumont Doghouse there. Okay, so now we'll move and see one advertisement before we get to the next room. And this is kind of a fun window on the 1920s. So when you went to your local radio store and had your batteries checked and charged, the fellow behind the counter in suit and tie pouring the highly corrosive acid into the battery. That's how things were done back then. But I was very fortunate. I mentioned earlier being mentored by Bill Denk. And some of you may remember Antique Radio Club of America, the Antique Radio Gazette, I think was the publication. Bill was an anchor behind that. When he died at 95 in 2006, I helped his widow sell off his collection. And she very generously gave me a handful of the sets, a lot of Crosleys, which are quite nice. But Bill was a Crosley guy. He was born in 1910. His father had a drugstore in North Dakota, and they carried Crosley radios. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get a lot of his Philco material. There's actually something I should bring a copy and give it to Steve in the museum. A fellow by the name of Murray, a treatise on television written by a fellow at Philco, and it may be something that the museum should have in its files. So I got a copy of that from Bill, along with a lot of his patent files, Philco radio brochures. Some of them you may have seen as we walked around the room here. So now we're going to move to the next room. We're going to take a big step forward here, go into the 1960s. And I remember in college in the early 70s, roundies were everywhere. And I probably had about 5 or 6 of them. You could find them on just about every street corner on Saturday. And today they're tougher to find, and even good CRTs. I wish I didn't get rid of all the ones that I had back then. This is a 1966 Dumont. And again, a nice shout out to Tim, who did a super job on this, and lucky me. Tim had a new inbox, 21 FPP 22, and dropped it in there. And this thing works like $1,000,000. And as he says, really great lollipop color, which is especially evident in these, vintage cartoons. Now, the 2 TVs on top of the Dumont color, the Philco is a 1948. It's in the 1000 series. I forget the number. That has to be recapped. The Sentinel is probably going to be done after the Dumont Doghouse. That's an electrostatic. You'll see I have a Philco electrostatic. We'll see that in just a few minutes. But I think they're really cool sets. They get a nice picture, and they're kind of fun to bring back. And this Sentinel on the right kind of looks like a suitcase, and that one's in pretty nice shape. All the innards are there, so if I'm fortunate, I know the CRT is good. I've tried that. I've tested that. So barring unforeseen problems with some parts like flybacks or whatever, I mean, that should probably come back pretty nicely. So turning our attention now, we're going to go back to the 1940s with Philco. And this was a pretty recent, again, restoration tune-up by Tim. Really works nicely, has a razor-sharp picture, pretty nice audio. I did find, I don't know if some of you have had this issue, but my cable company is Optimum Cablevision. And about a year ago, they did something funky to the signal. I'm not sure what, but the flat screens work fine with good audio, but the old sets, the audio was really terrible. So of course I went to Tim, what do I do? And he said, oh, John, we'll set you up with a blonder tongue modulator and you'll be in great shape. So I've got a cable box. Actually, it's over the Dumont color set that you just saw. And that's actually powering the signal to all these sets. So I've got about a dozen sets off of one cable box in this modulator. And it brought back the audio beautifully. Below the set that's on is a 1950 Philco, which belonged to my grandfather's cousin. So that's kind of a family piece, which is fun. I've got to recap that. I know the CRT is good. Again, nothing special, but a family set. So I'll bring that one back to life. So a couple of other things just to take a peek at in here before we leave this room. I've got a nice tongue saw tube clock that's hanging on the wall over here. You might have seen that when we looked at the Dumont color set earlier. Actually went to visit, I guess about 3 years ago, my younger daughter who lives in Northern California. We were in an antique shop and they were practically giving this away, so it had to come back in my luggage, a nice piece. I also have, in addition to radios and TVs that you've seen, a small collection of gramophones. I've got an Edison gramophone here. And actually that one works pretty nicely. It's got a nice Morning Glory horn. So as you can see, the collection is somewhat eclectic. There's a little bit of everything here. We should just pan over here for a second. we can take a look at something that I'm sure many of you have either seen or you may even have one. And the Antique Wireless Association was nice enough to give me a second prize, a Philco 48-2500. I've got stuff on the top so I can't open the lid. But 40 years ago, this set worked beautifully. I'm sure it needs to be recapped now. I haven't powered it up for a long time. But it's got a nice CRT. Everything is there. So I'm going to have to recap that and bring that back to life. At the tender age of 15, when I started collecting radios, this was my first radio, a 3-dialer, a Feta Nutridyne. So that's obviously a perennial favorite. And I mentioned Bill Dank, one of my mentors from Philco. This Crosley belonged to him. He had it on his desk. And that actually works really well. And it's hooked up to this tower speaker, which I bought on eBay. And I'm willing to bet that Buford Chittister probably redid the cone on that. It's just a beautiful piece, works really nice. Obviously, the cone's been replaced, and my guess is it's probably Buford. And if any of you dabble in radios or go to the meets, I mean, Buford has been restoring speakers for decades. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, but a couple more rooms with a couple more sets. We're going to move over here. As you can see, this is kind of a rambling old Victorian. We're old house people. This was the original dining room, which is now my wife's music room. And in 1949, prior to Chiang Kai-shek's fall, everything was all about China. And obviously the radio and TV manufacturers got on that bandwagon. So this is not the big Chinese set that Stromberg Carlson made, but the smaller version. And kind of a fun story, I was at an antique radio club swap meet of New Jersey. This would have been, maybe 10 years ago. I'm standing next to a guy. I said, yeah, I got this Stromberg Carlson in my garage. I think it's one of those Chinese sets. I really need to get rid of it. My ears kind of perked up because I had the big cabinet, which I actually gave to the museum a few years ago. I never had the guts, but hopefully either the museum could use it or they gave it or sold it to somebody who could. But I really wanted the full set. So I went over to this guy's house just a few miles from where I live. And here it is. It's actually in pretty decent shape. And this one I can take credit for actually 100% restoring myself. So I recapped it and just did some basic alignment, and it gets a beautiful picture. I mean, there are few TVs that I have that are sharper than this Stromberg Carlson. It's really nice. But it's got a great turntable, AM and shortwave. The whole thing works. It's kind of a fun set. So I enjoy that. And the theme in this room is black. We've got a black piano. So we've got the black Chinese set, a Chinese piece of furniture over here, and some other things. So from here, we're going to move to the last couple of sets in two adjacent rooms. Yeah, this Philco, I'm forgetting the actual number, 48 something, I think, which actually I bought from the tube fellow at the museum. I'm forgetting his name now. He's got one whole wall of the museum garage there. I'm forgetting his name, but he had this set about 6 or 7 years ago. It was nice and clean. I thought, oh, that'll be a nice addition to the collection. So that's my first electrostatic that I was able to bring back to life with the help of Tim. And it gets a nice sharp picture. It's got good audio. It's got a nice clean cabinet. So a good performer. And so the last set of the evening, because I will not torture people with the basement, because the collection totals radios and TVs probably about 150. You've seen just kind of a smattering here, but the basement is kind of a war zone, so we won't go down there. But things like an Andrea Sharp Vision, which I actually got from the museum a few years ago. I bought that at the auction there. A Zenith Bug Eye. A few fun sets are down in the basement awaiting restoration. But the next set we're going to see is a Crosley. And this is a 1948. This is the Spectator 9-407M. A really nice set. I actually bought this at an AWA auction in Rochester probably about 10 years ago, and brought that back to life. Tim helped me out on that one as well, but a nice clean cabinet, nice wood, kind of a copper face there. FM TV and a phono jack on the back. I want to put a little 45 player on top of this. But it gets a pretty decent picture. Not as sharp as a Stromberg, but not bad. And of course, the classic, Dumont tuner that a lot of these manufacturers licensed. And here's an advertisement of this set and its sister set from 1948. Hopefully that's somewhat visible. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the formal tour. I'm more than happy to answer questions if people have them. If there are things that you saw that you want to see again, gee, John, there was a cool radio in that first room. It's a whatever. I'd really like to see that. I'd be happy to show you things that we kind of glossed over. But questions or comments from the group?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Mike Molnar. I wanted to make a comment about your Dumont color set. My family had one. The first year they went rectangular, it had a 23 EG picture tube. And we were very proud that it was a Dumont. In later years, I found out it was really an Emerson because the only thing Dumont had on any link to it was the name that Emerson had bought out. And the chassis was very similar, carbon copy of a CTC 16 RCA, and could actually follow that diagram to do any kind of work on the set. I'm not sure about your round one, but I think it's probably within a year of the one that we had.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting, Mike, you bring up, Emerson, because my first job was Colgate-Palmolive. I actually stayed there for 30 years. We had a factory in Jersey City, and as you probably know, the Emerson plant was right outside the entrance.
The Holland Tunnel, yeah.
Yeah. So chances are these sets were probably made in that building.
Yeah, probably. And I just, last thing I want to say, you had a great camera person because I did a similar tour around my place holding the phone, and that did not work out very well.
Oh, I thought you did a nice job. We actually, as a dry run, at the suggestion of Dave, said, no, log on to this job, John. You'll get an idea of what it's all about. You've got a fabulous collection.
Oh, well, thanks. But you learn what not to do wrong. So, okay. Yeah. Well, thanks. It was a great tour.
Well, thank you. Glad you could join us. Any other questions?
It was. I just wanted, this is Chuck Conrad from the Texas Broadcast Museum. We're also Dumont fans, more Dumont broadcast equipment, but we like the TVs too, and logos and stuff like that. And you've got a great collection. I just want to say it's one of the nicer video tours I have seen, and I think you have a lovely house and a great collection. So congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, Dumont is kind of my hero. An unbelievable engineer. Probably not the greatest, businessman. I mean, as you know, the networks and Paramount and all the stuff that was going on kind of took him away from his real area of expertise, which was engineering. I mean, the father of radar. Who could come up with a Westminster and a Hampshire with all those clever gizmos, the retracting tube and everything? I'm often marvel. Some of you probably seen the advertisements. Oh, look at this flat screen comes out of this piece of furniture. I said, you guys are 75 years behind the curve. Dumont did that in the 40s. So as we all know, everything cool has already been invented.
Dumont was to television what Armstrong was to radio.
Yes, absolutely.
That's pretty accurate. I think I'm a real Dumont fan, and I'm really a fan of Alan Dumont. I mean, he was an amazing guy, apparently.
Well, it's interesting. One more quick story. A friend of mine lived down the street, grew up in Montclair. He's a gentleman, probably close to 80 now, sat behind Alan Dumont in church every week as a kid. So knew the family, and apparently a really generous person. The neighbor that I mentioned, his mother-in-law that worked as a teenager said that, he would often tour the plant. He would talk to people. He was a very down-to-earth guy. What he did with the CRT and really, improving it, lengthening the life, the capabilities was just amazing.
I'd like to just comment that I enjoyed this very much. I thought you had a very excellent collection, and thank you for showing it to us.
Well, thank you very much. Glad you could be part of it.
You're welcome.
Any other thoughts or comments?
John, this is Steve. Fantastic. Thank you for doing this. I think the tours of collections are the ones that spark the most interest in this meeting, and yours was really, really excellent.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And one of the best parts was your TVs are already turned on. It was a real surprise when you opened up the Chinese box and there's a TV behind there. It's working. Pretty cool.
I spent a lot of years collecting and didn't have time to restore, but now with I'm working part-time, semi-retired, playing with the toys a little bit more and bringing them back to life is really fun.
It is. And it was even nicer, though, that they were turned on when we got here. So we didn't have to wait to plug it in or something. It's a great program anyway.
Oh, well, thanks. I didn't want to have any drama. Sometimes, as you know, they can be a little finicky. So I thought, you know what, let's have them all teed up so that we don't have any drama here.
It's always fun when you plug it in and the smoke comes out or something. That makes your day.
Yeah, well, we've all been there, right?
Absolutely. We've had that happen. We have a predictive we have a whole bunch of predictives at the museum, but there's one that occasionally will blow up when we turn it on, which is always very exciting. Well, we tell people it was probably one of the worst TVs ever built, and there's an argument for that. And then when it does zort out during the middle of something, it kind of is a good explanation point. I've actually thought about putting a smoke generator out of a Lionel train set in the thing, so you push a little button and make some smoke pour out.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When Tim was telling me about, John, these things, I knew they were difficult to work on, and frankly, never got inside one. But when he started talking about, unsoldering boards, and he's done this before, I thought, you know what, this is going right to Tim's bench. It's bypassing my bench. So Scott did the early work on it, and Tim finished it up recently. So,
yeah, I worked for a Philco dealer when I was in high school, about 1964, 65, something like that. And these things were coming in all the time, and changing the picture tube was really special. I never actually changed the CRT, but I helped. And my vocabulary became expanded greatly listening to my boss as the parts would go flying apart the place. You could take it apart easy enough, but putting it back together was a whole other story.
Yeah. Yeah, they're dogs to work on, that's for sure. Okay, well, I guess we're all set, unless there are any other questions. Okay, well, Dave, I'll turn it back to you, and I think it's open topics at this point, right?
I'll just suggest that if you want to hang in, John, and if anybody has any additional comments, if you want to take the time and go back and look at anything else interesting, because you've got I think we could let this meeting run 24/7 for a week, and you wouldn't get to stress all the cool stuff you have there. But if you want to point anything out, or if anybody has any questions about anything, I'd certainly hang in for a while and hear a story or two behind some of the other things, even non-TV things.
Yeah, and if there's a huge groundswell, I could even give you a 2-minute run in the basement, you can at least see all the things that are awaiting. Dave, you've been down there, you know.
I survived.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to hang out, and if people have additional questions or whatever, that's fine. Great.
And then our regular, anything goes, any topic anybody wants to raise. I guess we can do that now.
I have a question. Where are you located, sir? That where you showed these TVs and everything.
Yeah, I'm in northern New Jersey,
Okay.
Morris County. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I could make another Dumont comment if you'd like to hear. Not too many people knew until I did some research. I found out for myself that he worked on mechanical televisions for Jenkins when Jenkins opened up the New Jersey facility, and then eventually that folded up. But he worked on some of the later ones that had the lenses in each hole in the discs and used a crater tube. And
yeah,
then,
actually, it's interesting you bring that up. I had a what I believe was a prototype oscilloscope made by Dumont, and we were trying to figure out whether he did it when he was at Westinghouse, whether he did it maybe in his basement when he was starting actually before he started the business. This was late 20s. It was, I think he had AC filaments and a DC outside power supply for this thing. It was a really interesting oscilloscope, and actually traded it to Chuck Azzolina for some things. And part of the bargain there was he restored that K-part for me. But I decided it had to be in a really special place. And Chuck has, as many of you know, an amazing collection. Yeah. So that's where it lives now. But there's probably a really cool story behind that, but nobody really knows exactly what it is. I got it at Lehigh. I was at Lehigh in the early 70s. And between class one day, these are the kind of stories you can't make up. There's a whole pile of stuff on the street outside the physics lab. I'm looking at this stuff, boxes of tubes, all kinds of stuff. It's like, holy cow. So I have one of my friends, don't let the trash truck take this. I'm going to run and get my car. So I took 3 carloads of stuff up to the fraternity house from the street outside the physics lab in 1975 at Lehigh. And one of the items was this scope. So somehow it was donated to Lehigh, I'm assuming, and maybe by Dumont himself, who knows. But there was handwritten specs on the tubes inside. The yoke actually came apart like a sandwich and appeared to be, hand wound. I mean, it was a real piece of art. And here it was literally minutes. You could hear the trash truck down the street. I mean, that's how close it was.
Wow.
I have a question. Maybe Chuck, if you've been blowing up predictors, or if you guys have been working on them, I just borrowed a wire wrap tool from a friend yesterday in anticipation of working on one of my predictors, and I learned a couple of things. I learned that most of the wire wrap wires are of a much, much smaller gauge than the cables that hook up to the side of the predictor board. And I learned that there's a wire wrap tool and there's a wire unwrap tool, which is separate and distinct from the wire wrap tool, which anybody know anything about that? Anybody ever had any success with wire wrap tools on the predictors?
Dave, I've got a few of those. If you want one, give me a call. Come on over, and I'll let you borrow it.
Have you monkeyed around with the predictor chassis with them?
No. But
Okay.
we've got a lot of wire wrap stuff.
Okay. And what's the difference? What's the design difference and the functional difference in a wire wrap tool and a wire unwrap tool. I've never seen a wire.
Well, the wrap tool. Well, the ones we have are motor driven. I don't know if you've got a handheld one. I've got a motor driven wrap tool, and the unwrap tools are just like a probe. And at the end of there's two sides for the different wire gauges, and at the end of them is just like a reverse corkscrew. So you put it over the post and give it a twist, and it'll take the wire right off.
Because a regular manual wire wrap tool just has a large hole in the middle for the pin and a small hole for the wire. And I've heard supposedly a wire wrapped connection against seemingly against my intuition is supposedly a more secure, a better quality connection than a soldered connection. I have heard that. I don't know if it's true.
That's what Bell Labs said, and they started changing over central offices to wire wrap some years ago, and that's why we bought the tools, because we had stuff we had to do over 32A of A. But if you need an unwrapper, come over. I'll let you borrow one. I got a couple of them.
All right. Well, I moved away. I'm not down the street from you anymore, but maybe I'll catch you when I'm in the neighborhood.
When I worked for Western Electric in the mid-'60s, installing central office equipment, they were doing all wire wrap, but their standard practice was it only works once. If you had made a mistake and had to unwrap and rewrap, then you had to solder.
Wow.
Back in the 1960s, when last time I actually worked on a Predicta, and also GE used wire wrap too, as I recall. Our wire unwrap tool was called a pair of diagonal cutters, dikes. Snip, snip, and that was just a whole lot quicker and then solder it back. That's how we fix it. Of course, we're trying to fix this stuff fast because it's a TV shop, and the faster you can turn something out, the more money you made. So.
Well, that's what I've always done, working on the Predicta chassis, but I figure maybe there's a better way or a more elegant way, but I guess there's nothing elegant about working on a Predicta.
I think you got it. I think that's the total answer. There's nothing elegant about it. You just got to slog through it.
Back in 1978, I worked for Y12 in Oak Ridge, and they had a computer room back there where they would design these special computers for their operations. And they wouldn't tell you what they were doing, but I would watch them assemble these boards on like a pegboard thing. They were all wire wrapped. And this guy would have these pegboards that were like 1 foot by 24 inches, and it had these stakes all over that thing. And when they'd install ICs on it, they would connect them sort of like a PC board on the bottom, but they had this little fine blue wire that they would use a wire wrap and do every one of them. There were like maybe 1,000 of these connections on it. But I did get into a discussion with them one day when we were talking about wire wrap. And he said, it's very simple. He said that, and he had a little motor driven little wire wrap tool, and he'd just do it. He was very efficient what he was doing. But he said that when you use a wire wrap, he said you had something like 28 different degrees of contact on that stake. It would wrap it, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 times or whatever. But anyway, you get, every time you wrap the wire around it once, it's making 4 different connections, if that makes any sense. He said you've got 28 different degrees of contact on it, and it was more secure. But they never really had any trouble with intermittent connections on those boards. And you'd have these big, huge boards, and they would have thousands of connections on it, and they gave very little trouble. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, Western Electric's time to failure was at least 25 years. And I had a supervisor once that we installed a relay rack, and he called us all around and said, there's a relay here that's intermittent. He took out his hammer and bashed it and said, it's not intermittent anymore.
Well, John, if you're still around, if you want to show us anything else that you think is particularly interesting upstairs, or if you want to chance a trip into the scary basement, I guess we're ready and waiting.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the scary basement. You'll see a lot of things that are awaiting some love. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. The catacombs. Yeah, a pair of steam boilers to heat this ark. Oh, it's too bad I got a drawer in front of this. If any of you are ham radio people, I've got a really nice HRO here, but unfortunately it's got a ton of stuff in front of it. All the coils, that's kind of neat. An old Bosch. But let's get to the TVs. Let's see. Yeah, this Zenith, I know has got a bad flyback and obviously needs to be recapped. I'm going to do some work on that. Oh, and unfortunately, this, you always have to kind of shift a little bit here. This Andrea Sharp Vision, I actually bought at the museum, well, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Needs to be recapped. I think the CRT is good, so that's on the docket. On the bench over here, you know, this is really kind of a war zone down here. I'm recapping a 48 1000. Kind of a funny story behind this. I'm on the beach, 4th of July week, kind of scrolling on my phone under the umbrella. Actually, it was a museum website, and Steve probably and many of you may have seen this. Free 48 1000 pickup in New Jersey. I thought, boy, that's got my name written all over it. So I contacted the guy. Turns out it was still available, so I went and got it. I'll show you the front. The only thing missing, unfortunately, is the back, which is, you know, not uncommon. Yeah, I had to do some work on my boilers this past couple of weeks. So I got stuff in the way here, so bear with me a second. Actually, I'm going to put the camera down so I don't torture you guys here. Yeah, but here it is. It's got a great CRT, at least that's what the checker says. Nice cabinet, couple of veneer dings, but nothing serious, so I'll clean that up. So that's the outside. And I'm maybe 20% of the way recapping. You saw that. 50 years ago, 1972, I was a senior at the Episcopal Academy, a prep school out on Marion, PA, outside of Philadelphia. And we had a ham radio shack. Well, here it is. 50 years later, I've been dragging this thing all over creation, and no longer being an active ham, I'm going to let some of this stuff go. But something that some of you might find interesting, this a friend gave me. This is a national scope, I'm going to guess from the 40s, and a amplifier sweep for oscilloscope. I'm assuming that, yep, that's James Millen Manufacturing down here. And then a homebrew something that I'm not sure what that does underneath it. But that's something I'll probably talk to Chuck Azzolino. That probably belongs in his collection. He may not have one, but that's kind of an interesting old item. A lot of tube hi-fi. I've got a lot of that stuff. Some solid state stuff. I mean, some of you probably had when Quad was big, 1974. Down there, you can see the 4 meters, the Sony Quad setup, SQ, CD discrete, all that stuff. A Heathkit mono tuner and preamp. And the reason I picked that up, I remember my dad built one of those when I was a boy in like 1961. So I thought that was cool. So I got that. A lot of this stuff probably has to be thinned out. This actually is something that I got to work electrically, a Westinghouse radio phono console. The cabinet needs quite a bit of love here. But what I like about this, sorry about the jerky camera here, there's so much stuff around here, but there it is. It's got a really nice face, and it's got this classic Cobra arm phono, which I just think is super way cool. So Westinghouse and GE actually made one virtually the same set, and I have the GE out in the garage. Somebody from the New Jersey Antique Radio Club wanted it. I've got a badge room. It's in pretty rough shape, but he takes basket cases and makes them gorgeous. So I thought, you know what? This belongs with him. So that's that. Various and sundry test equipment. Actually, my first scope as a teen. Everyone's probably worked on these. The classic 340, Dumont scope here. I've probably got 3 or 4 of those. I got to thin some of those out. A Zenith black dial. All kinds of meters. Tons of sets awaiting an old Philco. Stuff back there that's hard to get to. Some hi-fi stuff. Yeah, at least 5,000 tubes in various boxes, all marked. A lot of 3 dialers. I've got multiples of these things. There's a nice Radiola 4 down there. An Atwater Kent 20. I'm sure a lot of you recognize that. A nice Amplion horn. Unfortunately, it's got a chip in it. A Westinghouse columnaire. That needs the radio's fine, needs quite a bit of cabinet work, but a cool set. More Crosleys from Bill Denk, another AK-20 compact, Atwater Kent 84, missing a piece of trim there. He needs some love. A homebrew oscilloscope from a friend of mine. I guess the rest of this is pretty much mostly parts. But let me get back to the radio room. Bear with me a second here, because there are a couple of things in there that I think may be of interest to some folks. But when the weather's bad, I end up coming down here and work on a project. Actually, this is interesting. I mentioned Bill Denk working at Philco. A lot of Philco material is in this binder I got from him. A lot of patent material there. And actually, when I get back to the radio room, I think I can put my hands on that treatise written by a fellow, Steve, or somebody may recognize the name Murray, who worked at Philco. And I think this is 1937. He wrote this treatise on television. So let me see if I can put my hands on that. Yeah, you probably think this guy's really crazy. Christmas trees, bubble lights, but it's too much trouble to take all this stuff down, so I just leave them up all year. Yeah, I think that treatise on television may be in here. Here it is. Okay, let's see. Progress report for 1937, Television Department, Philco Radio and Television. Yeah, A.F. Murray, it looks like. And this is from the library of William E. Denk, one of my mentors who worked at Philco. And I even have his call sign. Bill was in Devon, I was in Wayne. It's been a long time since I've read this. I even forget what's in here. But what I'll do is I'll make another copy. I'll send it to Steve. Maybe he's never seen it. It might be something fun to add to the library. Not really sure what the contents are. But in terms of...
You could scan it and put it on the internet.
I could do that too. That's true. But a couple of interesting radios that some of you might find I should be put in jail for neglect here. This is a very early Western Electric that I got from Bill with the classic tennis ball tubes and the amplifier, probably 1923, and the Western Electric horn, a really nice collectible piece. Have not gotten into it. I hope the filaments in the tubes are good. Transformers, etc. Have no idea, but cabinets are in nice shape. I mean, everything's there. They just need a little bit of love. Something that I missed with Dumont. This is really kind of an interesting poster. I'm having trouble with the camera here, getting really close. But this is waveforms and various Dumont. It was put together by Dumont in the 40s, showing things like square wave generators, obviously as a oscillograph. So kind of a fun Dumont piece that I had framed so it won't get ruined. Let's see, anything else that's of interest here? Yeah, Predicta's still going strong here. Some of you will recognize Stromberg Carlson Treasure Chest, 1925, a beast of a radio. Haven't taken the time to restore that, but probably need to. Some other Philco stuff that's kind of fun. Registered dealer, Philco Electric. The hand-painted Model 511s, Philco's first commercial radio. Michael Procease, I'm sure many of you have seen his very thorough documentation of Philco. He's got a nice section in there on these hand-painted radios, which is really cool. And I actually have one. It's not in beautiful shape, but nice. One of the green ones here. Model 511, 1927, thereabouts, which is nice. A really nice Stromberg Carlson. This would have been, I guess, in a radio store. Oh, something I skipped over, an RCA 630. This belonged to a friend of mine. It was the first TV he saw as a boy. And he's in his early 70s now, so he would have been 5 or so when the set was new. And cleaned out his parents' house, said, "John, you want this thing?" "Sure, why not?" So it's got to be recapped. A nice Atwater Kent cathedral from the early 30s. Majestic. I'm one of these cornballs that loves these consoles. I mean, they're monsters, but they've got great sound, great cabinets. I just really enjoy them. A player piano, which actually works. And actually something about the player piano that's kind of fun. You probably can't see that here. Yeah, Griffith Piano Company, guaranteed for 10 years, 1925. So 95 years later, it's still going strong. Works like $1 million. Some other interesting radios, a Crosley Playtime, this grandfather clock radio, which did work. It's being cranky for some reason. I got to get in there and find out what's going on with that. Another couple of bills, really nice. He restored this Crosley Model XJ, Crosley RFL, Radio Frequency Labs in Boonton Township, which is near where I live. A Westinghouse RADA, some of you are familiar with those. A Greeby, one of my first sets, a Tusca 225 up there. But I'm probably at this point borderline torturing people, so can't think of anything in here that's super unusual.
Not at all. We're enjoying this.
Yeah, some fun tubes over here. It's amazing, and many of you are in the same situation. I mean, you gain a reputation, and people actually call you. Oh, John, I found this stuff, or my father had this in his basement, blah, blah, blah. Well, I got one of those calls, and these beautiful DeForest Audions were given to me by a friend a couple years ago. Really nice. And there's a tennis ball Western Electric tube there. So hopefully out of the 4, I have 3 good ones for that set that I showed you a few minutes ago. The classic RCA Tapestry speaker, the Edison Mazda bulb, and the verbiage on the box, his only rival, the sun. I remember I was very early collecting, 71, I was 16, and found this at a garage sale, was enamored by that. The classic old Radio B batteries, 45 volt batteries. Couple of nice cathedrals, a Crosley and a Philco up there.
Excuse me, on that B battery, was that for the plate?
Yes, actually, this is the best radio to demonstrate that. Really great question. Typically, these 3 dialers from the mid-20s used a handful of voltages. For your filament, you had 6 volts. And that was you saw the Philco advertisement, the wet cell, typically, literally a car battery, because these tubes, 201As, pulled 1/4 of an amp on each filament. So there was a lot of current. So you had a wet cell for that voltage. Then you had the dry batteries for the B voltages, 25, 45. This one actually is, 22 and 90. Is what this, and you just gang the batteries together. Some of them required 67 volts. Inside was a little C battery, which looked like this, your bias. This Everready is a 4.5 volt C battery. So you had a whole series of batteries, as many as 2 or 3 of the dry batteries, like this Sunbeam battery over here. You had a C battery like the Everready, and then you had your wet cell. So firing up these 3 dialers was a real procedure. Now, if we're lucky, this Crosley at night, AM is a disaster. So I'm not sure how this is going to work. Let me turn this. I've got an eliminator on. Probably more static than anything else, but this is the Crosley playing now through the tower radio speaker.
As he would advertise, you're there with a Crosley.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of, I've got a ton of Crosleys. This one actually may cooperate and work. Let's see if it comes on. This would be 2728, one of their first AC sets with a music cone. This came from Bill Denk. This is, during the day, it gets great reception. I'm not sure at night. Yeah, more static than anything else. AM at night is a real problem, and I don't have a real good antenna on it. So, a really nice, some of you that are radio people might be familiar with an Emerson Stradivarius, actually, which is pretty collectible. And it's got, kind of the violin Stradivarius at the top, kind of a classic set. This one's a little rough, but can be brought back to life with a little elbow grease. Those of you that may be hams, a Pilot Super Wasp with all the coils. At some point, I'm probably going to let that go because some of this stuff, you saw the basement. I can barely walk around in this place. So I really have to get a little more selective. So we will, I'm going to be doing some thinning out over the next few years. So with that, unless there are any other questions, that's kind of all she wrote at this point.
Hey, John, it's Scott Marshall. How are you doing?
Scott, oh, great. Boy, wow. You saw your predictor there, I hope.
I did. I'm calling out. You're calling out of me. It makes me feel like a legend.
Yeah, well, and your Zenith porthole, as you saw, is performing beautifully.
Yeah, I really miss it. Every once in a while, I think about it and go, oh, I wish I still had that because that was such a beautiful thing. And I took pictures of it while I was restoring it, and I found them, and I can show them right now and talk about the restoration a little bit if you're not too bored with that.
Sure,
okay.
Why not?
All right. The set came from the basement of a house in North Jersey, where an elderly couple was moving out. And, a lot of people when they are done with when they retire an old TV or a radio console, they just sort of leave it in the basement. And my girlfriend at the time was doing estate sales, and she found out about this one. And she said, Scott would like this. So we went and got it. It was really difficult to get, but we put it in my home. She gave it to me as a birthday present, actually. And in order to take revenge on her, I made her help me restore it. So here's this set. Let's see if I can make this work. I took these pictures. Can you see that, guys? I'm not sure whether you can.
Sure.
That's one of my first pictures of it when we first got it. It was about 2005, as you said. And I got a close-up of the radio there. Sorry,
Yep.
There's reflections there. And that's a really neat radio. And here's the back of it. Can you see that all right?
Yes. Yeah, and happily, this set was totally complete. Had the back, really a nice example. The cabinet, pristine, just a beautiful set.
Right. Yeah. The family that had it just left it in the basement for 40 years or whatever, and we just picked it up. And so here's the set being worked on my workbench. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a metal cone tube. And I got a picture of all the parts I took out. You can see that's the special idler they had on the Cobra-matic turntable.
Yep.
And it was full of bumblebee capacitors. And nowadays, when I restore something and I take out the bumblebee capacitors, I sell them on eBay because the audiophiles and guitar people like those, and they'll pay well for them. So don't throw those out.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Here's the first time I got the set working. I don't know if you can recognize who's in there. That's Leon Theremin playing a theremin. I was actually a theremin player at that time also.
Oh, wow.
And here's a beauty shot of the Cobra-matic turntable. And I remember I played with those when I was little, and I actually ruined them when I was a teenager. But it was fascinating to have the continuously variable playback speed on those. Does yours still work, John?
It does beautifully, and you're right. You just nudge it up or down, and you can plus or minus 78 or whatever. Yeah, it works beautifully.
Yeah, and I wanted to get a picture of the radio in the dark, lit up, and the lights in the radio actually light up the turntable underneath. I don't know if it's easy to see, but I thought that was a great feature. And here's another shot of the radio in the dark, lit up. I got a shot of the grill cloth down there, and that's really gorgeous, and it was in perfect condition as well.
Yep, still is. It's absolutely flawless.
And here's the control panel for the TV, and I opened it up too to get another picture. It's also, the porthole fascinated with me as well, because I'd never seen that before, and it was such a strange, it's head scratcher why they made portholes like that. There's the control panel. There's a switch in there to switch between normal and porthole, where it simply stretches the picture vertically, and encourage people to watch TV distorted like this. That's Katie Couric in the morning show, and in the advertisements they say this is the future of televisions, because since the eye is round, the TV picture should be round. So that's it. It's I also have a set of pictures for the Predicta while I was restoring that, but I couldn't find them in the time here of this meeting. But thanks a lot for the call, the shout out. And here's the TV I'm working on now. This is a big corner cabinet Magnavox, and it's fully restored, but it needs a 16 AP4, and I can't find one.
Oh boy. Okay.
So that's what's going on here.
Cool.
Great to see your collection. And did you ever? I remember the veneer on the doors to the Zenith porthole was coming off. Did you ever do any work on that?
No, as a matter of fact, appears to be good to me. So I'll have to look around for it. Must have been really minor.
Oh, it's sort of, yeah, at the edge of the doors, it's sort of pulling out like this. It was probably because it was in that moist basement for 40 years.
Okay.
I had in my mind someday to try to glue that back together and put wood vices on it and see if I could. But it's not changing. It's in a good environment, so it'll just stay that way forever.
Yeah, it's probably shrunk back, and I'd have to really kind of poke around to find it at this point. It's not evident to me.
Excellent.
Yeah, actually, one more really quick story, which some people in the museum will find amusing. When I bought the Model 5, I bought the Model 5 and the 48 2500 at a museum sale in, in Morristown. And this is in 1978. So I went in there as a 23-year-old kid, and I saw this Model 5, had no idea what I was looking at. All I figured, hey, this is an early color set. This is cool. I'm going to buy it. And I bought it for $100. And I didn't even have $100. I put it on a credit card, and I think I paid $20 for the 48 2500. But here's the funny part of the story. When I brought the Model 5 to the museum, and people were, I sold it off the back of the van, and it went, like I said, to Wayne Bear. At lunch that day, there was somebody at the table, and he said, yeah, I had a chance to buy a Model 5 in 1978, and some kid outbid me for it. And so I walked over to the guy and said, I'm the kid. I mean, I forget who it was, but he was at the museum and apparently was at this sale and dropped out at $100 on a Model 5 in 1978. I mean, these stories, you can't make them up.
Of particular note on your Zenith porthole, I find it fascinating that they have that switch on it to modify the picture a little bit. You know, they say it's a round tube and your eyes are round. Who is that speaker manufacturer about 40 or some years ago that made these audiophile speakers that they said the only way to hear natural sound is a speaker cone that's in the shape of an ear? And I mean, this is real. I mean, they had a picture of the speaker. They say your ear hears sound in a certain way, and a speaker should deliver sound in a certain way, which kind of reminds me of that. I can't remember who the manufacturer was, but they did make them. They didn't last long, though. You have a very fascinating collection there. I admire that.
Oh, well, thank you.
You have some very interesting stuff, and a lot of it's working there. And you have a large house there, one of those large, I always call them a Jersey house up there. Great big old houses up there, but they built those because coal was $2 a ton back then on some of them. And
Well, funny story about coal. This of course has a steam heating system, and the coal boiler was taken out circa 1950. And the kid who grew up here at the time told me the story. But long story short, the way they sized the radiators back then was like 20 to 25% bigger, because you had to crack the windows in the house to keep the coal fumes out.
That's a very efficient heating system, that you have a hot water, through a radiator there. I lived in an apartment with my family there years ago, and if you wanted heat, you just unscrew the valve there, and within 2 minutes, you'd have to turn the valve off. It'd run you out of there.
Yeah.
Very impressive, though. I like the way you have your place laid out there. My place looks like the basement of the Smithsonian, more or less.
Yep. Well, I've enjoyed sharing it with everyone, and thank you for the kind compliments.
Are you going to be there at October 15th up there in Columbus?
No, I won't, unfortunately. I've actually got friends and family coming that weekend, and for me, it's a 9-hour trek. It's quite a haul. So I get there for most May conventions, but I haven't been to any of the swap meets.
Yeah, Steve has asked me to do a presentation, similar to what you've done here, and I said I want to, but my problem is I have about 12,000 square feet and 4 buildings, and all of them are full of goodies, and I have thousands of artifacts, and I need to properly display it. What didn't help me very much, 7 years ago, I had a terrible warehouse fire, and I lost a lot of stuff there, and stuff that was irreplaceable. But anyway, most of my good stuff is at my house and other buildings. And I lost a lot of stuff, though, but it's kind of put me in a bind, though. And I built a brand new building on the site of the fire, and it's about 6,000 square feet. And like I said, it looks like the basement of the Smithsonian. But Kmart, a lot of the Kmarts went out of business, and they were selling stuff. And I bought a large display case that was a built-in. It's 33 feet long. Ooh. So when I built a balcony, a mezzanine in mine, but I built this showcase there in like a display area, which is very nice. And people said, "Boy, that fit perfectly." Yeah, I built the balcony around it. But anyway, that's probably the focal point at the moment. But I've just got stuff stacked up, and I've got so much to do, and I need to do something there. But by the way, what type of a camera are you using there? Your video is clear as a bell, and I'm impressed with your camera presentation there itself. What are you using for a camera there?
It's actually iPhone 12. It's my wife's phone. That's better than mine, but nothing special, just a standard iPhone, but it is doing a nice job.
Yeah. Oh, it is. So it's just a regular iPhone then? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. I'm impressed.
Well, what we found helped is we did a little bit of a dry run. We just turned a lot of lights on, and that really helped.
But yeah, you've got a very clear, crisp picture there coming through there. And it just seems like those iPhones there. I remember even professional cameras that professional photographers use. There's something like 18 megapixel or something like that, which is considered professional. But these iPhones, they're claiming they're like 57 megapixels, which is hard to believe.
Wow. Dave Abramson.
Yes, I'm here. Yes. And can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to go back to those comments about, music and things being round. How people thought that, how things should sound. My great grandfather was a designer for the Hadorf Piano Company. And he designed pianos, upright pianos, instead of a straight line. He created these pianos over the soundboard that were curved because he believed music notes were round. And he built these pianos with these rounded cases just for that purpose. And we have one still in our family.
Huh, interesting. Well, you know what, Dave, it's amazing. What goes around comes around. There's another story, of course. Dave Abramson is the one who identified my Model 5.
Yeah, yes.
In 2003, I was at Sarnoff. You were there, and I pointed to a CT100. I think I've got one of these. And you gave me a little demo, and you said, you know what? They also had a prototype. Go home and look at yours. If it has a crosshatch on the speaker instead of the rectangles, then you've got the prototype. And I thought, well, I'll go home and look. What the heck, right? Well, I went home and looked, and sure enough, it was the crosshatch.
Yep.
So, Dave, you're the one that opened the door on the Model 5. The fourth one that was discovered, thanks to you.
Glad to help. No, I had so much fun up at Sarnoff. I had my TK-31 sort of restoration up there. And it was there for a while. And I love that place.
It's fun. Yeah.
You were talking about the Dumont labs up in New York when they had their television. Excuse me. When they had their Captain Video and their early presentations up there with a Dumont electronic cam. I have a prospectus. It's a spiral bound book. It's a large, it's actually more of a book than it is anything, showing early pictures of the Dumont studios up there. And I also have all of the factory notes and inter-office memos for the Dumont electronic cam. They made 3 of these 16 millimeter Dumont electronic cams. I have serial number 1. And I think down in Texas, he has one. And I think he kept one. Anyway, all 3 are accounted for. Unfortunately, in my fire, I lost the controls to it, but I have the camera in a different place. But he was the guy that I remember when I was doing research on this, that Dumont had donated all of their Dumont electronic cams to the Princeton University, or they donated them to a college. And come to find out, my friend up in Chicago, he knew that one of the guys up there at Princeton, and he got all 3 of these electronic cams. And he got all of the inter-office memos and notes and things signed off on. And I mean, how many of those are out? No, there's only one book of these things. And he gave me that. And I highly treasure that. And I'd like to publicize that somehow, because I've got all the notes and factory pictures and Dumont, with his electronic cam. And it's quite an interesting story. But I was on eBay one day, and there was some guy up in New York City that had that prospectus book. It's what they gave out to prospective advertisers or whatever, showing what they do up there. And it's a very informative book. And I've never seen one before, and I've never seen one since. So, how many of those are running around? So sometime I'd like to share that with you, or if you ever come down to Tennessee, I've got enough to keep you busy for hours. Literally. I mean, people come in, they say, oh, well, I've only got about a half an hour. Well, 3.5 hours, I'm still talking, you know. You know, they just find stuff so fascinating. And, you know, if it wasn't for us, half of this stuff would probably have been tossed in the garbage.
Oh, yeah.
You know, many times I've got lots of stuff that was rescued, and if it wasn't, and I've been collecting for over 50 years now, and I was up in your neighborhood up there in the early 70s. I was at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and I taught radar up there, but in Meyer Hall, they had the TV studios. And I used to spend a lot of time up there. And Jeffrey Bourne, who has a nice museum, you know, up in Huntington, West Virginia,
yep,
came up with that 4-inch image orthicon there, and it was on a wooden sort of a display-like thing, and it had a plaque on it. This was from their first color camera at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And I thought, where did you get that? You know, now they've disassembled Fort Monmouth up there now. It's nothing more than real estate now. But I find these pieces coming out of Fort Monmouth, and of course I can say, you know, I want that stuff because I was there. And I found another plaque. You've heard of the Zoll tube, that quad triode tube for pulsing radar. There was a guy, Dr. Zoll, that invented that tube during World War II. And I have one of those tubes. I was at, I think, one of the radio fests. This guy had a large bronze plaque commemorating Dr. Zoll for being one of the good old boys at Fort Monmouth and stuff. I thought, well, how many of those are running around? I was able to obtain that. But, you know, I find this stuff, and it's just, you find the darnest stuff in the darnest places, you know, and think, I was there. The only problem with it, I didn't know who Dr. Zoll was when I was teaching there. And I just wish I could have met him. And I found that there was a lot of people at Fort Monmouth that were of historical significance. And it's just nice that, you know, I was there at one time. And just like you're up there in northern Jersey and met some impressive people. I just find it terribly fascinating. So, you know, I can relate to your story there. I was very impressed.
Julian, I'll just mention that one of the things that we do at InfoAge is every year we have something called a Wall of Honor, and it's a dinner where they sell tables to deep-pocketed corporate sponsors to raise money for the place. But the purpose of it is to recognize some of these amazing people that worked at Fort Monmouth, that worked at Camp Evans on the secret radar research during World War II and afterwards. A lot of these guys worked there, and their families, nobody knew what they did. They were sworn to secrecy. A lot of them grew old and died without ever talking about what they did there, without anybody ever knowing about it. So one of the things that we took on as kind of a mission there was, now that all this information most of it's been declassified, is to give these guys the credit that they earned many years ago. So every year there's a big dinner, and in fact it's next week. So I'll be going to that next week. This will be about the 10th one, and it's kind of a cool thing. And it's nice that these guys, there were some real American heroes that toiled in obscurity in the laboratories there, and nobody ever knew what they did. And they helped win the war. They helped make this country what it is.
Hi, my name is Reed Vickerson, and I'm in Minnesota. My dad was stationed in Fort Monmouth. I believe it was about 1942. He was in the Signal Corps now, the communications end of things. So, but I don't know what he did. But
yeah, there was a lot of that.
It's very possible that he was then shipped out to Iceland, but he was definitely, we went over some papers, and he has like a group photo from Fort Monmouth, and never knew we didn't even know where that was. But anyway, just
Well, I can't tell. Obviously, you don't know. Nobody knows. But I can tell you with almost 100% certainty, what he did was save a lot of people's lives.
I agree with that. Fort Monmouth was an experimental thing for military communications, and they were also responsible. You've heard of the wind talkers, the American Indians that they spoke Navajo language that nobody else could understand. I have two of those radios, and one of them says something Fort Monmouth on it, where it was a developmental thing. And they developed a lot of stuff up there. It's just a shame that the government shut down Fort Monmouth, and I'm sure the real estate people up there were just licking their chops up there trying to get a hold of that property up there, which they've been doing. But, it's just sad that it's gone. And I remember Asbury Park, New Jersey and stuff, that the boardwalk and everything up there. And, now, back then you could go to Asbury Park and, man, it was busy 24/7. It was just always something. And not long ago, I was up there and it seems like it's a ghost town. If not much, they've taken down all the amusements and the boardwalk. But I think Asbury Park has made a comeback. But I was interested at that television set, that bar TV that Steve was showing, made in Asbury Park. Just another thing I didn't know. That's interesting.
I'll just put in a little advertisement here or whatever, but I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry. But if you go and look on infoage.org, you'll find a lifetime's worth of reading about all the work that was done at Fort Monmouth and at Camp Evans from World War II, before World War II, after World War II.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Reed. I'm not a very technical person, although my collection includes one Dumont television from, let's see, the 1954. I saw it in a antique store, and I was fascinated by it. It had all the insides in it, so someone had not made it into a aquarium. And so I'm in Minnesota. I'm in St. Paul, and I was looking around for somebody who could actually possibly get it running again. And there's actually a place. It's a small television shop in a town called Stillwater, John's TV, and I called them, and they said, "We've been in business since 1947, so we'll take a look at it." and so I brought it out to them, and they said the picture tube was functional but weak, and they got a little bit picture. And then, well, this is how I got basically interested in your organization, because through Steve, I found you had a picture tube that would function in it. So I bought that, and we sent it out, and it runs really well. So it's always lots of fun. So
you're lucky. There's really a vanishingly small number of people who do that type of repair work anymore in the country. And John's TV is one of the very few. I think there's only two places that I know of that are actual ongoing commercial enterprises that still do that type of repairs.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, he does repairs on all the TVs, but in his front room, he's got just a whole collection of odds and ends, different things. I know he's got a Philco there, and just a lot of things from, I don't know if they're historic, but they're certainly from the 50s and 60s anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll just mention to you, if you poke around in that InfoAge material and you see anything in the Camp Evans section, if anything there piques your interest and you want to know more about it, look me up. I can hook you up with some people who would be happy to talk your ear off about what your dad might have done there.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
In talking about Philco Predictas, I've mentioned it several times though, but in my collection, I have two Philco Predicta sets, new in the box, never opened. One is the G4242, that's the 21-inch, and the other one's a 17er, the little princess set, I guess they called it. But they've never been opened, and the larger one there, I cut a small hole in the corner of the box and shined a flashlight up in there to see what it looks like. And yep, the tags and everything are all there. But what worries me, it has that foam that they use, that thin foam packing material. And I think that stuff is kind of deteriorating or, getting gooey or something in there. But I'd like to open up one of those boxes one day and see what it, make an event out of that.
You might be able to use acetone to clean that foam off.
Well, you have to be careful with acetone because the plastic on the larger set, the 21-inch, that stuff is very soft and stuff, and it doesn't take much to. Acetone is pretty strong, but yeah, it might. I got to figure out something on that. An oil-based something like Goo Gone would probably be better, but
yeah, maybe so. I don't know.
I'd be afraid to use acetone because acetone is a key ingredient in making, like plexiglass and stuff. It'll melt plastic.
Yeah. Well, you probably should wear protective gloves and plenty of ventilation.
Oh, there's ways around that, but it's just I've got 2 of these sets new, never opened.
Actually, I have some antique cars parked in my driveway, and I have pine trees hanging over them, which leaves pine tar. And I found a cleaner, a detailer told me about, which I can't remember the exact name at the moment, but it is wonderful for clearing up stuff like that. I'm not advocating it, recommending it. I've never tried it, but I'm wondering if it starts with an S. It's called if you Google Tarminator, TAR Minator, you'll probably find it. I'm wondering if something like that might be useful. I don't know. It's just a shot in the dark.
Sounds like a good idea.
I've heard that
it's worth trying.
Turpentine can clean up tar. I don't know if you want to try that or not. Somebody told me that they used to use it to get it off your skin if you got it on tar, regular tar on your skin. So I'll just mention that.
They make stuff for cars, like bug removal and stuff.
Yes, exactly.
But any ingredient that's used in the making of paint or plastic is something you don't want to use. One time, I used to like, 409 Fantastic and white Grease Lightning and stuff like that. Those are real good clean. 409, and I learned the hard way. I was cleaning.
Oh, Julian, you checked out.
You got terminated.
Hey, Dave, what was that website you mentioned?
It's a product. It's a spray product.
No, Dave Sicka on that super secret thing.
The super secret thing. I can't tell you. Then it wouldn't be a super secret anymore. It's InfoAge, INFOAGE.
InfoAge.
Yeah, InfoAge. Yeah, InfoAge is an organization now. We're in there. The New Jersey Antique Radio Club is one of the museums. There's several museums that make up InfoAge, and it's also a World War II living memorial, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. The original buildings were built by Marconi. It's on Marconi Road. They were built by Marconi in 1913 as part of his transatlantic receiving site. So there's really no better place to have an antique radio club, I would think, than on Marconi Road in a building built by Marconi. But they were sold to a number of different places, including the Ku Klux Klan over the years. And then prior to World War II, the Army took them over, and that's where they built this super secret radar research laboratory, where you guys were talking about Harold Zoll and whatnot. All of that type of stuff went on in there, and all kinds of absolutely, utterly amazing things that nobody knew about.
More secret than Area 51?
Well, this actually existed, so we know for a fact. So there is that. But yeah, if you go to the website, it's a really, really awfully difficult website to navigate. And it might look like there's not much there, but if you poke around, there is literally a lifetime's worth of reading. There are thousands and thousands of pages of information on stuff that has been done there over the years.
Info age.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For what it's worth, Ed Raitan was an old friend of mine, and he did a lot of work at Area 51 for, I believe, Raytheon, I think it was. When I talked to him on the phone, he would not say that name over the phone. It was always some other camouflage name of some sort, just for fun.
Yeah, but if you ever go to Las Vegas, you'll see an unmarked 737 that goes back and forth between there and the airport, and it parks way off into the side.
Oh, yeah, it's a pure white paint job on that jet.
Right, exactly.
They say if you're talking on your cell phone and you mention the word machine gun or words like that it's picked up, but I don't know about that. It's all kinds of folklore out there.
If anybody else wants to continue, I got something I've been playing around with on Video Karma, looking for some help. If anybody has a few minutes to listen to me, is that okay?
It's open discussion. So, and you just made me feel bad. I haven't been on Video Karma in several weeks now.
All right. Do any of you know the late Peter Yancey and his efforts in mechanical TV?
Sure.
Peter sold these kits years ago, and I'm thinking 20 years ago. And it was I think it's about a 30 dot, a 30 line
scanning disc television.
It's basically a science fair kit. But in the day when I built this thing and bought it, it worked. It's given me troubles now. And for those of you that have never seen one, here's the receiver. If I can fit it all into the screen.
I have one of those.
And you bought the kit, and it's got Peter's. Hang on a second, I got to turn it around. There's Peter's little mysterious electronics box down in the bottom. Pretty standard, small 8-horse motor to run the disc. Mine is acting up. And when you bought this thing, you had to assemble the wood cabinet, you had to stain it, you put on a trim, glued the magnifier in place, and so on and so forth. It has to be elementary electronics. It's a photocell on the camera side, which is, the camera's over there somewhere. I'm not going to bring that back. And then there's, a red LED on the receiver side to duplicate that crater lamp look from the era. Mine is just it's just not happy, and I try and make a picture and I'm just getting garbage. I'm starting to suspect I need to really pour light onto something. But these things are really fun to, even if it's a science fair.
They're fun to display as a museum piece, you show how it actually worked.
They're exactly, Julian. They're fun to display. You can take it to, your, local radio club meeting and show it off as a show and tell.
And it's a big deal too.
I'm starting to think these things are like really rare. I've got some little serial number stickers from the original construction, which, this is like number 800 and something or another. I don't believe for a minute he sold 800 of these things. Because I put this up on Video Karma, and I've been bouncing back and forth with one other member that has one with similar problems. I'm wondering, A, how rare these things are, and B, these little like, Peter's little magic boxes inside these things, they're riveted shut. I got to drill out rivets to get it open. I got to cut some paper to get it open and see what's inside there. It's a photocell carrying basically an analog audio signal to a receiver.
That's all they are. It's video modulation,
Yep.
And now Peter, it's just like most manufacturers that when they manufacture something, it's very rare that you'd ever find an instrument or something that says serial number 1. They never do that. They don't want you to know. And they will always start out like 1000, then 1001, 1002. For all we know, I knew Peter, and he was a little obstinate there.
That's today's understatement.
Yeah, well, I tell you what he did to me. I bought one of those sets just like what you just showed, but I didn't get the camera with it. He sold it and a camera. Well, mine works fine. And I went to Peter and I said, Peter, can you build me a camera or sell me a kit? Unfortunately, I got a hold of Peter in the last 6 months of his life. And, oh man, he was losing it fast. He got really mad at me. He says, where's the camera for that thing? And I said, I never got, he was really pissed that I didn't have a camera with it. And I said, Peter, I'd like you to make me one, whatever it takes. Well, this went on and something happened there. And anyway, I sent it to him for him to make a camera for it. And anyway, he had it and nothing happened. And oh man, his wife told me that he couldn't do work anymore, and he was just couldn't go in the basement anymore. And that's what it looks like. Hey, sell me. I mean, since your other piece doesn't work, I'll take that.
No, it's busy here.
So anyway, Peter.
No, it's the reverse of there's the photocell assembly, which is covered in foil, and then here's Peter's little box down here.
Right. It's in reverse.
This thing is just, it's an audio device forward and backward, powered by a photocell and showing up on an LED.
Video modulation. So anyway, his wife was talking about he had to send the receiver back to me, and Peter is yelling, "Be sure and insure that thing for $20,000 and blah blah blah." Oh, and it wasn't much longer after that. He was just gone, and his 6 months were not good.
I've heard that $20,000 story before, but what's more amazing is, you have the receiver. I have both halves of the kit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Video Karma with another collector that has both halves. There's nothing else.
I wish Peter had left some information of, his printer. but it would not. I would say he used a lot of discrete parts, and that if you were to reverse engineer it, looking at it, I'd like to look inside that little black box and see what's in it. It might surprise you one way or the other. And the camera there, I was really brokenhearted that, it's something, he lost it, his mind just went kaflooey.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do anything anymore. But boy, he was just really mad. And another guy, the guy that came from Belgium, he was really into this stuff. You remember he came to the Early Television Foundation 10, 15 years ago. His name was Assman or something like that. It was
Is he the one that had the color camera?
No, I can't remember that. He came up and he built a scanning disc receiver, and he was really big into it, but he just suddenly died. He was out walking on a...
Hey, when that happens,
Yeah, I remember he brought Belgian chocolate with him. That was my favorite part of the whole thing.
Hey, if you're ever up there in Pennsylvania, up there in Carlisle, go to the Lindt Chocolate Factory outlet. You'll get some stuff very similar to it.
I've never heard of Carlisle. The what factory?
Lindt, Lindt, Lindt chocolates. They make these little round balls. They're rather expensive, but they're Swiss chocolate made in, I think, Germany. And in fact, we just stopped there. I have to stop for all my friends. They say, while you're there, it's a huge outlet. I don't know what they are in property taxes up there, but property taxes for warehousing up there must be very cheap. When you're on I-81 and you just cross into Pennsylvania there on the south side, you see these huge 1,000,000 square foot buildings up there. And the Lindt Chocolate Factory up there is no different. They don't make it there. I think they're just the marketing and packaging. That building is, you stand on the side of the building and it dies out in the distance. It's that big. And their showroom in there is huge. And they have these huge bins of every flavor you can think of. And you get a bag and you fill it up and all that. But anyway, I tanked up on chocolates this time. And my friend across the street wants me to get him, a full 2 pounds of chocolate and caramel there only. And they just make sure that I bring all this stuff back to them. But talking about Belgian chocolate, but his name was Assman, just kind of a Assman. And I was really disappointed to hear that he passed away. And because he was really on it, and I was going to have him help me with something. And now he's gone. But that other one that Peter Yenser did, that mirror screw television, if you remember that, where they have mirrors and they're kind of like one of those yard art things that are twisted. That was fascinating.
It's a spiral.
A spiral, like they have a 1/4 inch glass, and it's about maybe 1/2 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch wide and about 6 inches long, and they have them in a screw design. And that's a fascinating concept. And I was hoping to get Peter to make me one of those. And then there was a guy that showed up at the Early Television Foundation with a homemade scanning color wheel.
That's the one I remember. And he was quite old, quite elderly, as I remember.
I don't remember him being that old, but
well, I remember a demonstration by somebody that was quite elderly. But the picture that came out of that color thing, he had a receiver, showed you the picture. I sat in front of the camera and saw myself.
You couldn't tell that it wasn't a CRT color picture tube.
It was
perfect.
It was astounding, the reproduction on that thing.
He had like a 14-inch black and white monitor, like in a security system, and he had that color wheel. And I'm looking at that thing, and I could have bet dollars to donuts that there was a color CRT in that thing. It was that good. I approached him. He showed up subsequently, and I said, I'd like to buy that from you, or I'd like to do something. He says, well, I've been using it for parts. And I said, well, can you put it back together and sell it to me? I don't know. I can't remember who he was now, but
I don't either.
It was that good. You couldn't tell the difference.
Yep.
And it was quiet.
It was quiet. The colors on the screen were bright, vibrant, and I mean, flat on accurate.
It was just like you looked at a 14-inch color monitor, a regular, or a computer screen or something. It was perfect. And there's another talent lost, I think. And
that's a skill set and a knowledge that is just gone. And I don't know who is around to replace it.
In my collection, I also have 1928. It's called a Telehor, Telehor. I think it's Belgium. It's a scanning disc television, and it's just the mechanism itself with the photocell on it. Not photocell, but the neon lamp on it. And I've seen, and Assman had one. That's what it was. He had one of those, and he made a cabinet for it. And I was going to have him make me a cabinet for it, but here we go again. It's just what you're holding right there is identical to what I've got. Identical.
Yep. No, this is, I bought the whole kit. I remember it was quite pricey. I think I paid around $800 for this.
Yeah, $600 or $800, and I'd still pay that today to have them duplicate it.
And that was back 20 years ago,
at least.
And I had to stain the wood and glue the cabinet together and put the little spiral trim on it. And,
you did a nice job.
Yeah, what he sold as a kit was astounding. It was every part possible. The wood, the screws, the little tiny, nails to hold the little stickers in, the little badges on the front.
What's the serial number? What's the serial number on yours?
That's in another file.
Oh, it's not on the back
somewhere. I gotta go back, but I remember. No, it's some little metal plaques that I never affixed to this thing.
Oh, okay.
And I have them, but I remember them being very high numbers, and I'm thinking he didn't sell this many.
I wouldn't think so, because not many people would know what it is. That was very specialized.
And now on Video Karma with Richard out west somewhere, who has another kit, and we're trying to get these things working. That's two of us. That's it. Two of us that have surfaced with these things. Maybe there's others. Julian, you got one half this thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's 2.5 of us that have this. Maybe Peter was right when he said it's worth $25,000.
Oh, he was mad. She was going to back to me because he couldn't do anything anymore. And Peter's in the background.
No, and for the rest of you watching this thing, I hope you're not bored or whatever by this little singular discussion. So please excuse us. Hello? Hang on. Lost y'all. Hello?
Yeah, still hearing you. Julian's dropped out.
I think anybody that was bored voted with their feet. Yeah.
I dropped out for a bit here on the old interweb, so I'm back. Apparently, I got connection problems here at home. Hello? I'm back.
No, you're coming through fine.
Oh, it did. Okay, it's on my end. It's cutting in and out.
Dave Sicca, what was the name of the Army fort or camp that you were talking about earlier? What was the name of it?
Well, it was Fort Monmouth. It was the U.S. Army's regional base in New Jersey, and the Fort Monmouth was the main location, and Camp Evans was a satellite location. It was
Okay, can you spell that?
Well, which one?
The first one, Fort Monmouth.
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 Yeah. Now, Fort Monmouth was, again, it was an Army base there, and the Evans area, EVANS, or Camp Evans, was a geographically separate location a few miles away from the main Fort Monmouth base, but it was part of Fort Monmouth. But it was fenced off, and you for decades, if you drove through the fence and didn't have an appointment, you'd be shot.
We had ground zero over here where the Navy used to store all of their weapons. It was called the Naval Weapons Station in Concord, California, and our children used to play soccer at a school adjacent to the fence. If the soccer ball went over and anybody tried to get it, there was a half a dozen Marines that came out of the ground with guns blazing, ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't mess around.
Yeah, they did.
Now, Fort Monmouth also had another half to it called the hexagon. Like we have the Pentagon, they had the hexagon up there in New Jersey, and they did a lot of developmental work in that building. But I think they closed that down first before they did the fort.
There was so much interesting stuff there. I mean, maybe someday in the future we could actually do a meeting on it. But I mean, it has nothing to do with the early television museum or television collecting. But it's just, absolutely fascinating.
I'd love to hear that.
It's just an audio modulated signal coming out of this thing. Goes to the
Also at Fort Monmouth and Meyer Hall, they had a museum in there as well with a lot of artifacts that they'd developed and stuff. And I had to pull CQ in that building some nights, and I used to go through and check everything out there in the museum.
I forget where that went, but that's not there anymore.
It's gone. A lot of that stuff, I think, went to Fort Gordon. Fort Gordon picked up the Fort Monmouth stuff.
Yeah. But there are a lot of communications. There is actually a television tie-in. The Tyros 1 satellite in 1960 was monitored. Downlink was monitored at that location, and that's basically where television satellites began. Tyros had the television cameras on it, and that's when weather forecasting stopped being black magic that was never accurate, and they actually started to get you some usable weather forecasting, and that was on the Camp Evans site, was part of that deal. And they also, back in 1950, they bounced
Richard
radar off the moon for the first time.
Somebody,
and that was arguably the one of the beginnings of the space.
He's having trouble with his, and we're trying to figure it out.
Dave, it looks like you let the magic smoke out there.
Yeah. No, if Chris is available, you're still there. I see you. I have a question for you for your sets that you're up and running. What are you doing to feed these sets all around the upstairs, main floor, downstairs?
Yeah, the only thing I'm doing, Dave, is I'm taking the output from the CableVision box. I've got a modulator, a blonder tongue modulator, because I had all kinds of problems with the audio.
Yes.
And yeah, and Tim Moritz hooked me up with that, and that thing is awesome. But I just have a couple of video amps and just a couple of banks of splitters. So I've got hardwire cable outlets basically in every room in the house almost.
Okay.
So what I do is just take the output and amplify it, split it, a dozen times, and there it is.
Around my place, I work for the Phillies as the chief engineer, and we had, multiple cable systems over the years. And as we ripped them out, I grabbed some old Drake. They're little, shelf-like blade things. And they put out a plus 29, and I saved a few, and I'm using them on channel 7 around the house here. The 7 seems to work well. And I put it into a $1.99 RCA rabbit ear. I bought it at the Goodwill. And I pulled out the antenna to proper 17-inch length. And I'm just shooting that signal around the house. And it's working great.
Wow. Huh.
And I think I have 3 of those blades, and I've got a DVD on one, a off-air, tuner on the other, and on another channel 8, something like that. It's working good.
Yeah, well, I'm doing hardwire channel 3, so all the sets are set to channel 3, and it's working for me. I had most of the hardwiring in. I just added a couple of rooms, and like in the what I call the radio TV museum there with the Dumont and all that stuff, I basically just got it piggybacked. So I've got twin lead going from one set to the other, and if you amplify it enough, it's okay.
I've kind of forgotten about using twin lead to these things.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I just, you've got the coax that goes into the, little transformer there, and you get 300 ohm at the other side. So I just piggyback off the screws off of one set and just go from one set to the next. And I think I've got 6 sets in that one room piggybacked, and the quality all the way around is held up nicely.
It looks that way. It looks good. I was just curious what you were doing.
You got them all daisy chained, and yeah, it works quite well there. There's not too much signal loss.
Yep.
Another thing I've got in my collection, I just thought of, I've got a 1952 Dodge Route van. It originally was from WGN in Chicago, and they used it for televising the baseball team, the Sox up there. And anyway, it was given to their sister station up in Minnesota, and they used it for a while, and then they decided to surplus it, and some guy ended up with it. Or no, they donated it to a college, and they realized how difficult it was to operate. And so after about 1 or 2 times, they surplused it. Some guy bought it and was going to make a camping van out of it, but it never happened. And it sat up there, and it just got rusty and all of that. And someone sent me a picture and said, "Are you interested in this?" And ended up getting it down there, and it's intact, except I don't have the dish on the top, and the cameras didn't come with it, but they were just TK11s. But all the electronics are still in it, and it has a Western Electric audio board in it, of all crazy things. but it has four separate camera inputs to it. And I'd like to restore that or do something with it. It's kind of rough, but I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. But just another thing. And how many 1952 Dodge Route vans have you ever seen? And when I got it, of all the crazy things, everybody that had anything to do with that truck was still living. And there was a business card hanging in it. And I ended up finding the guy and calling him. And a lot of people knew about that van, and he told me all about it and how they used to drive that thing and skate down some hill on solid ice up there with it. But anyway, something else I've got, and there's only a handful of these trucks still in existence. You know, Steve's got one up there. His is a nice one, but I've got one that's intact, but it's kind of rusty.
No, and certainly Chuck has, you know, that Dumont Telecruiser, probably the best example of one of these things.
I sold Chuck some Dumont cameras there a while back and some controlled CCU units. I had a batch of that stuff and didn't need it, and he was happy to get it for his Dumont Telecruiser there. Chuck, are you still on there? Is he still on tonight? Guess not.
I remember at my first station out in Illinois, we borrowed a black and white truck from WAND in Decatur, I think it was, to do some high school basketball tournaments in like 1969, 70. And we set the truck up, black and white. I forget what TKs they were, but I spent most of my day climbing up and down the ladder, stuffing tubes into my camera, trying to make it work. And we got them on the air.
It's amazing what they did back then, and everything seemed to work quite well, though. Today's a little different now. Everything's digitized now.
That's, you know, I'm 2 years retired out of the Phillies organization as chief engineer, and the primary reason, other than piling up some more years for the pension, was that digital's coming, and I didn't need to learn another iteration of broadcasting. I might be good at IT 102 at best. You know, even tonight, this computer's acting up. I wasn't going to be around for the next generation. Somebody else. Thank you very much, kids. Glad for it. Glad for you. I'm done. I've already learned like 5 generations of broadcasting technology. You're on your own.
Kind of reminds me when we get new phone books back in the 70s, we'd open it up and see what new TV shops opened up. But you know, when everything was going solid state, there was a lot of them that just went out of business because the old guys didn't want to learn solid state or anything like that. And
no, that, you know, I think it's understandable. You know, you learn your limits. Okay, done, gone. Thank you.
I used to, when my dad was up and transferred to Seattle, Washington, and we lived on Queen Anne Hill up there. And Queen Anne Hill is a mountain with a whole city on top of it. And all 3 networks were up there. And I used to hang out at the transmitter sites up there. And I learned a lot, you know, just doing, you know, I was 12 years old, and they'd let me sit there and do my homework there at Channel 4 Como. Incidentally, I've got one of Como's TK-41s camera, and I was happy to get that, something I learned about. And Chuck Ferris was instrumental in that one. And I was there during the World's Fair in Seattle, Washington, I watched them build it and also tear it down. But all three networks, he had channel 4, 5, and 7 up there, and they would work the World's Fair up there, and they had their booths up there that you could come see yourself on color television. And I remember Como's booth up there, and I have that camera that, you know, when I was 12 years old back in 1962. And you know, it's a small world. And some other Como stuff up there that came from them. And I met a guy up there, his name was Norman Alquist, one of the most brilliant persons I've ever met in my life, and he's 4 years older than I am. When he was 15, he built his own TK11, and what he did was look in service manuals like GE, RCA, Dumont. He would actually pick out circuits that he liked best and incorporated them all and built this camera. Won first place in a science fair up there. He got to travel around the country a little bit with it. And I'm still in touch with him. And a few years back, I asked him, I said, do you still have that camera? He says, yes, I do. And I said, I want that camera. And kind of another little convoluted story there. I was talking to Norman, and he said he'd like to get rid of a lot of that stuff. And he had some computer stuff, you know, early computer stuff that I was kind of wanting. And he didn't know what to do with it. But for me to drive from East Tennessee to Seattle, Washington and pick up stuff, you know, we're talking probably a week to 10 days minimum. And how much would it cost me? Of all the crazy things, I had an old ship's binnacle and that I bought when I was up in New Jersey from a ship's carpenter shop. And I decided one day here a few years back that I need to sell that thing because I don't really need it. And of all the crazy things, some guy from Kent, Washington up there called me, said he collects these things. And, you know, one thing led to the other. And he lives up there in Seattle. Well, the other crazy thing, he has a sister that lives right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And one day we were talking and he said, well, I have to come down there and either bring some furniture or pick up some furniture. And I had to bring that ship's binnacle over to his sister's house. And it was 3 blocks from my old storefront. Another crazy thing. Well, he said he's coming down. And I said, well, what are you driving? He says, well, I'll be driving a van of some description. And I said, how would you like to have all of your gasoline paid for? And anyway, he rented a Ryder truck there, you know, a box truck there. And he went over to Norman's house, picked up all that stuff. And from the time he did that and come to Knoxville, 4 days, he was on the road all the time. Well, I was figuring on $1,000 price tag here. You know, I thought, well, I'll give him $1,000. I think his name was John. I said, well, John, how much to owe you? He said $2,500. Anyway, I thought, well, pay the man. He did something that I probably either never would have done or would have cost me a lot more than $2,500 in motel room and gasoline and driving across country. And, you know, I took a lot of the work out. So anyway, I got all this stuff from Como. And in the deal, Norman had a 21 CT55 television set, a color that Como would use for a monitor in their waiting room. And it's got Como stamped in the back all over it. And I was able to get that set. And, you know, I got a lot of goodies out of it. But, you know, it's a small world sometimes. Truly blessed on that day.
It's a very small world.
And and not only that, but ending up with Channel 4's Como's first color camera. And it's got a beautiful design on the side of it. It has KOMO and colored plexiglass letters that they're kind of not embossed. They're like, they're raised like they were put in a mold or something. Beautifully done. And I just treasure that camera there, you know, and it was found in a Lincoln Mercury dealership up there. Apparently, somebody must have known somebody that owned the Lincoln dealership through Como. I guess they advertised through Como maybe. And anyway, somehow or another, they ended up with a surplus camera that they were going to throw away. And then somebody bought the Lincoln dealership up there and said, well, we don't need this thing in there anymore. And then Chuck Ferris, someone called Chuck, and he ended up with it. And Chuck is liquidating a lot of his stuff now, but he just said, well, I'd rather you have it as anybody. Como actually wanted it back, but they didn't want to pay the shipping on it, which is stupid, on their part. But I'm glad that they didn't, because anyway, I ended up with it. So another one in my camera collection. But it is a small world. And RCA made 25 of these TK40A cameras there. They mostly went to the CBS television city in Los Angeles. And anyway, mine is serial number 508, which means it was the 8th one built out of 25. And they started with serial number 500 there, like they normally do. And that's the one that came from Ed Rattan. Oh, Chris? Are you still on there, Chris?
It's John.
Oh, there's one up there.
With his wife's phone.
Oh. I just seen Chris up there. That's my son's name, spelled with a K. All things. John, I'm sorry. I was looking at my monitor here. It says Chris. I got you.
All right, everybody, I have to sign off tonight. Got a car show tomorrow, so I'm out of here. So long, everybody.
It's getting a little late.
Yeah, good to see you, Dave. I think I'm going to sign off as well. It was a pleasure being part of the meeting, and really enjoyed everyone's conversation.
You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Guess I'll sign out here tonight myself, and everybody have a great and a blessed evening there. And I hope to see some of you there at October 15th up there in Columbus. So good night, folks.
Take care.